Fusion Mobile, quality e-learning experience on the go.
Good day everyone, you're welcome to Fusion Mobile e-learning clinic. Yeah, we are still on commerce. We'll be looking at a particular topic under commerce, which is wholesale trade. Now, if you could recall vividly, in our previous lessons, we've talked about a wholesale trade. Now, wholesale trade involves activities of buying and selling of goods and services in bulk directly from the manufacturer. Now, a person who is involved in a wholesale trade is called a wholesaler. The person who is involved in a wholesale trade is called a wholesaler. Now, who is a wholesaler? A wholesaler is a person who buys goods in large quantities or in bulk from the manufacturer and sells in small quantity to the retailer. A wholesaler is a person who buys goods in bulk or in large quantities from the manufacturer or producers and sells in small quantities to the retailer. Now, the retailer buys, a wholesaler buys goods in bulk or in large quantities, and the wholesaler stands as or acts as a middleman between the manufacturer and the retailer. Now, I said earlier on that the wholesaler is the middleman. Now, let's quickly look at this illustration we have on the board. We have three different businessmen. We have the manufacturer, we have the wholesaler, and we have the retailer. Now, the wholesaler, you can see him in the middle of the retailer and the manufacturer. The wholesaler stands as the middleman or as an intermediary between the manufacturer and the retailer. You can see him buying goods in large quantities or in bulk from the manufacturer, and is selling in small quantities to the retailer. So you can see how it is in the diagram. Now we're going to talk about the functions of the wholesaler to the retailer. What function does the wholesaler perform to the retailer? Let's quickly go through that together. Right here on the screen, we have functions of the wholesaler to the manufacturer and retailer. Remember, I said earlier on that the wholesaler is a middleman between the manufacturer and the retailer. Now, one of the functions of the wholesaler to the retailer is advertising. The wholesaler helps the manufacturer in advertising their products to the retailers. The second one is bulk breaking. Remember, I said the wholesaler buys goods in large quantities or in bulk from the manufacturers. Now, warehousing, they help the manufacturer in the sense that when they buy goods in large quantities from the manufacturer, they store in their warehouse and keep them until when the goods are needed for use. The other function they perform to the manufacturer is bulk breaking. Now, like I said earlier on, that the wholesaler buys goods in bulk from the retailer and they sell in small quantities to the retailer. You know, the retailer, I said, is a small scale business. They do business with just little capital. They might not have enough money to buy goods from the manufacturer. So the wholesaler helps the manufacturer in bulk breaking because they buy goods in large quantities or in bulk. Now, warehousing, the wholesaler buys goods in bulk as well and store in a warehouse until they are needed, until they are ready for distribution. Now, advice. The wholesaler advises the manufacturer on what type of product the retailer wants or on the quality of the products the retailers want. Now, let's talk about the function of the wholesaler to the retailer. Now, the wholesaler sells in small quantities to the retailer because some of the retailers might not be able to patronize the manufacturer to buy goods from the manufacturer. So they buy goods in small quantities from the wholesalers. Now, credit facilities. The wholesaler grants the retailers credit facilities. At times, some of the retailers may not have enough capital to start up a business. So the wholesaler acts as sponsors to the retailers. They grant them credit facilities. Now, transportation. Sometimes the retailers buy goods from the wholesaler, and the wholesaler assists in bringing the goods to their doorstep. They make it available to them by through transportation. Now, variety of goods. The wholesaler buys variety of goods and sell to the retailer. Okay, now let's look at the next topic, which is channel of distribution. Now, the channel of distribution is a pathway through which goods and or services move from the manufacturer down to the consumer. Now, like I said earlier, that the commerce or production of goods and services is not complete until it reaches the final consumers. You can see in the channel of distribution, the consumers are the last in the chain. Now, let's take a look at the channels one after the other. You can see the first one. The consumer is buying directly from the manufacturer. Now, the second one is the normal channel, where we have the middleman, who is the wholesaler, and the retailer, then the consumer. You can see here the wholesaler is buying directly from the manufacturer, and the wholesaler sells to the retailer, and then the retailer now sells to the final consumer. Now, here the third channel is the wholesaler, between the manufacturer, the wholesaler, and the consumer. Here you can see we don't have the retailer here. The wholesaler is buying from the manufacturer, and the wholesaler is selling directly to the consumer. Now, here on the fourth chain, we have the agent and we have the consumer. In aspect of building, if you want to rent an apartment, for instance, you have to go through an agent, and the agent acts as a middleman between the landlord and the tenant, who is the consumer. Now, the fifth chain here is between the manufacturer, the retailer, and the consumer. Yeah, the retailer buys directly from the manufacturer, not the wholesaler now. The retailer buys directly from the manufacturer and sells to the consumer. So that's that about the channels of distribution. Is a pathway through which goods move from the manufacturer down to the consumers. At times you have the middleman, the retailer, and the consumer. At times you have just from the manufacturer to the wholesaler to the consumer. At times you have the agents in terms of building. You have the agents to the consumer, and then at times you have from the manufacturer to the retailer down to the final consumer. Now let's take a look at the first chain or the first channel. You can see that we don't have there are no middlemen or middleman here, like the wholesaler or the retailer. The reason is because of it takes longer chain. For example, before the goods get to the final consumer, it will have to pass through the manufacturer to the wholesaler to the retailer before it now gets to the final consumer. So it's like a longer chain. Now, the reason a consumer may decide to go directly to the manufacturer and not through the middleman is because of artificial scarcity. Sometimes the wholesaler may hold some goods and pretend the goods are scarce, and that can lead to increase in prices. So that makes the consumer go directly to buy goods from the manufacturer. Now let's look at the other topic we have here, differences in function between the wholesaler and retailer and the distribution chain. Now, the wholesaler have different functions they perform as well as the retailers. Now, the first one we have here is large space. Now, the wholesaler needs large space, for example, like large warehouse, because they buy goods in stock in order to store their goods. Now, the retailer just requires small space to display their goods because they buy in small quantities. Now, the wholesaler buys in large quantities from the manufacturer. They buy in bulk. The retailer buys in small quantities from the wholesaler. Now, limited stocks. The wholesaler are limited because they buy just a particular product from the manufacturer and they sell to the retailer. But the retailers have varieties because most of them have like 2 or 3 or more suppliers that supplies goods to them. So when you go into a retailer's shop, you can find different goods like Indomie, biscuits, and all those goods. They have varieties of goods. Now, To be a wholesaler or to start up a wholesale business, it requires large capital because they buy goods in large quantities. It requires huge capital. And to start up a retail trade, because it's actually a small scale business, it requires just little or small capital. Now, intermediary, they both are intermediary. The wholesaler is an intermediary between the manufacturer and the retailer. The retailer is an intermediary between the manufacturer, wholesaler, and the final consumers. That's that about the differences in their function. The wholesaler requires large space. The retailer requires small space. They buy in large quantity. They buy in small quantities and sell to the final consumers. They have limited stocks. They have varieties of stock. Now, to set up a wholesale business requires large capital, while the retail requires just small capital to start up. Now, they both stand as an intermediary between, the wholesaler stands as an intermediary between the manufacturer and the retailer, while the retailer stands as an intermediary between the manufacturer or wholesaler and the final consumers. Now, let's quickly look through the outlines together. The definition of wholesale trade is activities carried out in buying of goods and services in large quantities, while a wholesaler is a person who is involved in buying of goods and services in large quantities as well. Functions of a wholesaler, we talked about that. The channels of distribution, we talked about that, and differences in functions between the wholesaler and retailer in the distribution chain. Now, some questions will be displayed on your screen in order for you to evaluate yourself. Now, if you have any question, you have to keep replaying until you're satisfied. Thank you.